Through today, session 11 is pages 234 through, stand by, I'm looking, 249. Today we're talking about net a million, and we're talking specifically about leverage. Now, here's what we know. If you guys have been with me through this process, we've been talking a lot about the MREA book. Yes, this one. If you haven't read it, you should. You're in the wrong group if you're not interested. We're talking MREA book. So today, session 11, we are talking about net a million, because everything we've been talking about through this process has been the goal of being to where we have a business that grosses $1 million in revenue. And there's a big difference, as we know, between gross and net. And so in this section, and yet another one next week as well, he talks specifically about what's the difference, what takes you from gross $1 million to net. Because if you're like me, you know plenty of realtors that have a business that grosses $1 million, yet they net less than a livable wage. The reasons there are various. There's a lot of them, and it's different in every situation. However, what we know is there are some general guidelines that we can be following. So get your books out, get your highlighters, let's rock and roll. We're gonna start on page 234. Now, if you've not been with us before, we go through highlights, we go deeper into some of these areas. You're gonna wanna have something to take notes with. Let's get started. All right, top of page 234, under the leverage section, he says this: on the road to earning and then netting $1 million, you're going to experience a variety of leverage issues. Underline variety. It's not just going to be one thing, a variety of leverage issues. Hiring people is easy. However, bringing talented people into your business to work with you is never as easy as you think. Ever. Here's what we know, guys. We've talked about this. Hiring people's not hard, especially in this economy. I can put an ad out, and if I offer enough money, I can get plenty of people interested that say they want to come join me. That's not necessarily the hard part. What's the hard part? The hard part is finding the right person, the talented person, and that today is what we're talking about. So if that resonates with you, if you've had a struggle finding the right person or not having a revolving door and getting people that stay with you long term, if this is speaking to you, this section is going to be for you today. Here's what he's talking about. When taking leverage to the highest level, here are the 5 issues you're most likely to confront. So today we're going to unpack 5 issues that he gives us. The 5 most common issues that he sees keep agents from finding talent and then keeping talent. Okay, there's 5 common issues. It doesn't mean there may not be more than this, but there are 5 common issues. Here's the first one. You're going to see this on 234. Making the time to learn and implement the RTCK, recruit, train, consult, keep process. Now, if you are currently or were in the past with Keller Williams, if you're an old school Keller Williams person, you might remember this as a process we used to call recruit select. So it was recruit select, action training, lead and motivate. So we have to find the right person and recruit them to our organization. Then we have to train them to get them into production and producing at the highest level possible to get us a return. And then the motivation. How do we keep them? How do we keep them moving forward and keep them in our camp? Right? So that's what he's talking about. That's the general process he's talking about. It's not just finding the person. It's how do we train them into action and into the highest performance? And then more importantly, or most importantly at that point, how do we motivate them and keep the vision in front of them and keep our world big enough so that they can see they can accomplish everything they want inside of our world? There's no reason for them to go anywhere else. All right? Now here's what he says under that section on 234, because guys, this is one of the biggest things. Like I talked about before in various sessions, personal opinion. Real estate agents might be great salespeople. They're not great people in the terms of talent acquisition, training, consulting, because most people don't want to slow down long enough to do it the right way, which we're going to talk about. All right. He says this under that section, the biggest people challenge you'll have is this. Now, if that doesn't catch your attention, you might not have a pulse. The biggest people challenge you'll have is this: as busy as you are. As busy as you are. Yeah, I know you're busy. As busy as you are, you'll still have to find the time to learn to put into place this process of recruiting, training, and motivating. It is the number one thing I hear from agents all the time. Hey, why don't you hire more leverage? Hey, your business has hit a ceiling of achievement. Why don't you hire more people? The number one thing I've heard for 14 and a half, 15 years from people is I don't have time to train them. I don't have time to train them. I'm too busy. Where would I find the time to slow down and train these people? And while on one hand, it's easy to say that, on the other hand, that becomes your ceiling. You will never move past where you are. And so this is the difference between those that gross $1 million and net $1 million. The people who net $1 million figure out, how do we take one step back in order to take two forward? How do I purposely find time to slow down, to do the process right, to recruit the right talent, not just the right person, but the right talent, which we'll talk about, but to recruit the right talent into our organization. Second, then, how do I take the time to slow down and purposefully train them correctly so that they're doing the job at the highest level? And then third, once those two are done, how do I continue to motivate and keep them moving forward while at the same time staying a part of my world and my organization? Now, here's what he says. If you're going to hire someone, learn to hire the absolute right person for the job, someone who could do the job, solve difficult problems, and think at a high level. If you're going to hire a truly talented person, you'll also need to learn how to train and consult that individual to be effective. And if you're going to hire and train and consult someone, then you've invested a lot of time and energy in that person's development. You'll surely want to learn how to keep him or her. Here's what also happens. So more commonly than not, somebody finds a good person, but then they don't train him. Then there's frustration, and that's a whole other conversation. But this is this loop that happens. They get frustrated. They don't feel like they're doing a good job. Everyone wants to do a good job. No one comes into a role thinking, I hope I can just get by. They want to come in and do a really good job. Shame on us for not taking our time to train them correctly so that they can feel like they're winning, because no one wants to constantly feel like they're losing. They will leave you. Now, what he's saying here is we go through the work of finding them, training them. The second biggest thing we see with people is that then they become just a send-out breeder box for other teams. Like some people are really good at finding that talent. Then fewer people, yet still some are good at not only finding the talent, but training them. But a lot of those groups end up just creating opportunity for other teams. Now, if you're a team and you're really good at that vision casting, leadership, and the motivation, this is good news for you, because you can just find those other organizations that are terrible at the motivation and the vision casting and keeping people happy and with them long term. You can just fish from those ponds. Yet, I don't think any of us want that in our business. Most of us, if we're going to go to the time to find the talent, train the talent, we sure as heck want to keep them. And so he's going to give us some ideas on how to start working towards that end, okay? Because here's what I know. This is not a natural thing. Nobody comes out of the womb naturally good at this. I promise you. Yet it can be learned. Leadership can be learned. Now, here's what we know. He says on page 235, towards the top, if you have an assistant who can't get the job done, you'll eventually get the job back. What he's talking about is, earlier in the book, he talked about if you don't have a maid, you are one. So if you don't have an assistant, you are one. Now, if you hire the wrong person or not the highest talent person for the role you're trying to hire, you'll eventually get the job back. And at that point, you've wasted so much time, energy, resources, and effort, you may get so frustrated you may never hire again. And guess what? We hear that from so many people as well. Oh, I've already tried having an assistant. It just doesn't work for me. I've already hired somebody and it just didn't work out. I'm just going to do it on my own. And the tough part is these people, it's not that they don't have a desire to build a big business. It's that they've never invested in themselves and done what it takes for them to get better, for them to grow in their skill set, for them to understand who they need to become in order to attract and retain the right person, the right fit for them. Because guys, the whole idea of leverage is we shouldn't get the job back. That's how we know talent versus non-talent. That's how we know somebody is not talent for our role, is when we begin to get pieces of the job we gave them back. That's our first indication. Now, unlike most people, I'm trusting you and our response when we start to see that happening, our first response should be, where's my DNA on this? If they're giving me a piece of the job back, what did I have to do with this? Where did I let them down? Now, maybe it was in the hiring process. Maybe I brought them into a role that they weren't talent for. And at the same time, maybe they just aren't talent. Maybe they were a really good salesperson and it totally fooled me. All of that is possible. But the first question should always be inward. As leaders, we always have to ask ourselves first, where is my DNA on this? All right, further down on 235, he said it takes time to learn something, more time to implement it, and even longer to approach mastery of it. I want you to think through that. This is not going to be an event This is not a one-time thing. This is not I take one class and I am awesome at this. This is a process, as Gary would say, not an event. So how regularly is this a part of your growth plan? How consistently are you investing time, energy, and effort into yourself to become the best recruiter, trainer, leader, and motivator you can be? Because guys, there's not too many things in your business that can provide a better return than this. And we're going to talk more about that, but because this has everything to do with controlling your turnover or high retention rate. It all comes back to you and I. As leaders of our businesses, it all comes back to us. Now, it's easier to point at other people, but it all comes back to us. He says here further, the irony is that this recruit, train, coach, and keep are the kind of skills that once learned can save you an enormous amount of time over the rest of your life. That's the point here. This goes beyond just here and now. This can go 30, 40 years from now. This can be the difference between you having a business that's great for a couple years and you have a business that's great for your career. It starts here. This is one of the foundational components of having a lasting business that doesn't require you to work in it, yet you can still work on it. Further down, he says this, when you consider that it takes at least 3 to 4 months to find and recruit good people, underline that. It takes 3 to 4 months to find and recruit good people, high talent people, 3 to 4 months. So I want you to stop right here. I want you to ask yourself a question. The last hire you made for your organization, how long did it take you? Now, I know some of you are probably laughing right now because some of you may have done it in a few hours or maybe a few days. He's saying 3 to 4 months. Now, if you're with Keller Williams, there's a new system called Career Visioning that walks you through the entire process. If you're not, there's plenty of other programs you can use out there. It doesn't matter to me which one. The point is, do you have a process and a system you're using to vet candidates? Do you have a process you're using to vet candidates? What do we mean by that? A process we're using to strip our own emotion, our own feelings, our own gut reaction to this person's amazing. Because if you're like me, you've had plenty of people you've hired that you thought were going to be absolute rock stars, and they turned out to be complete zeros. And the flip side of that, people that you wouldn't have bet would have been rock stars turned out to be and maybe surprised you. So what's the process you're following? We have to have a process if we want duplicatable and consistent results over time. 3 to 4 months is what he's saying the average is. And from experience over a long period of time hiring people, I have to agree with him. And it's painful in that process because a lot of times you don't have that position filled. And so if you don't have a maid, you are one. And so oftentimes I've been the other position. I've had to wear both hats. I know it's painful. And what I can tell you from firsthand experience is it is always worth it taking the extra time. It's always worth not hiring from desperation. It's always worth going through the process to ensure that I vetted the candidates I have in front of me so that I'm making the best decision I possibly can for my business. It always proves worth the time and the stress and the extra work maybe I'm putting in because I'm the extra person in that process. It's always worth it. I promise you. Now, keep going here. Page 236. He says this. He says, remember these key points. And they're highlighted in mine. I hope they are in yours. He says this. So remember these key points. 236. Number 1, learn to recruit talent, the right person for the job. Guys, we don't have a lot of time to go super deep here, but this could be a whole session by itself. Recruiting talent is one of the biggest obstacles for most teams. Now, here's what I can tell you. I've been coaching teams of all sizes for a long time. Literally teams of 2 people to teams of 24 people and everything in between, like big teams, little teams, it does not matter. Recruiting talent has always been one of the bigger challenges for teams. And it doesn't matter if it's sales positions or administrative positions. It does not matter. It's consistently been a challenge. Now, what I can tell you is one of the most common things I see as a thread here that creates the pain and creates the problem that most of these people have with attracting talent is they don't know their value proposition. Because here's what we know. If you're a small team competing against a big team, what are you going to say? Oh, big is bad. We're small. We're a family. And that's not wrong. You compete with what you have. Now, if you're a big team, what do you say? Oh, well, we're big. We're not small. We have specialists for each thing. That's not wrong or bad either. You sell what you have. The problem is most teams haven't taken the time to clearly define what their value proposition is. What makes them special? What makes them unique? Why would somebody want to come work with you? Because here's what we also know. Each team is different. And each team has a different DNA and culture and feel and vision and mission. And all of them are good. None of them have to be wrong. All of them are good. What we also know is when you have complete clarity over where you're going, where your organization is going, what it stands for, why you're in business, you'll start to get really clear on who you resonate with, who you want to be with on this journey towards accomplishing your goals. When you find people who align with your mission, vision, and values, that's when you start finding the right people for the jobs you have open. And you don't get that until you, the leader, have clarity over where you're going and who you are and what sets you apart. So number one, learn to recruit talent. It starts with knowing who you are to best know who you're looking for. You cannot skip that part. And that's up to you, the business owner. Number two, learn to train them to do the job. We're going to talk about this. That's coming up next. That's a big one. This is where a lot of us fall flat on our face. We think we do a great job, and most of us are terrible at this, all right? Number three, learn to consult them to do the job at a high level. We're going to talk about that as well. Luckily, we have a framework for it here in this book. Number four, learn to keep them. Holy cow, underline this one. Because it doesn't do us any good if we're going to go through this process and do 1 through 3 exceptionally. If we don't figure out 4, this is a revolving door and it becomes exhausting and expensive. We have to figure out number 4, learn to keep them. Now, are you going to keep everybody? Absolutely not. You will have people leave your organization, and that's okay. I'm not talking about the natural attrition. I'm talking about retention challenges, which we'll talk about that. And number 5, invest time in the process of the recruit select process. So your investments of time and money pay off with excellent leverage and the growth that will follow. So let's look at page 237, because this is a conversation, this capacity versus cul-de-sac. This is a conversation that's been had for years, since this book was written. And it's one of my favorite conversations in this book in terms of leverage and talent, because it's so easy to understand. I can have it with anybody in any organization I've ever run, and they understand that fast what I'm talking about, okay? So look what he says here, and then we'll unpack it. Top of page 237, he says this: it would be natural to assume that talent is talent. You would be mistaken if you thought that. What is he saying here? What the heck does he mean? He's saying talent is not just talent. What he's talking about is there's a specific talent you're looking for. And not just everybody can fill the position you have. Let's keep going down that page here. He says this: there are broadly 2 types of talent: capacity and cul-de-sac. Now, if you guys don't have this page dog-eared in your book, you should, and I trust after our time here going through this page, you will. Because this is an awesome opportunity, not only for you looking forward at who I'm hiring. Here's what I want to also challenge you to do. Look inside your organization today and do an audit. Just yourself, just you. Or if you run the organization for somebody else or you're a partner with somebody else, do it together. But look internally as well, not just forward-facing for who we're going to hire. Look at who we have. Look at who we have hired and do an audit that way and say who that we currently have are capacity versus cul-de-sac. Here's what he means by that. Middle of page 237, he says this: capacity talent is someone who can do not only the current job really well, but who also has the desire and ability, thus the capacity, to learn and take on new tasks and responsibilities. The person has the desire and ability plus the intelligence to grow beyond the basic job description. He or she can plus it. Now, why is that so important? What we know is all of us are on a trajectory of growth, or should be. If not, why are we in business for ourselves? Go join up forces with somebody else, and that's okay too. I'm convinced that there are a lot of people in business for themselves today, meaning they've run a real estate team or they're attempting to build one, that they probably shouldn't be, and that's okay too. There's no right or wrong in this. But if you're moving your business forward, if you have higher goals, you're looking to take your business to the next level, what his point is, you're going to need talent that doesn't just service today's needs. You need talent that can grow with that business. Talent that can help you stay ahead of where that business is and where it's going. That's capacity talent. Now, further down there, he says this: cul-de-sac talent. Well, cul-de-sac talent is someone who could do the job really well, the current job. They can do it really well. They're not bad people. They're not bad people. They're not dumb people. They can do the current job really well. But underline but, who also do not have the desire or ability. Do not. So unlike the capacity talent who does have the desire, cul-de-sac talent, they're doing the job really well, and they do not have a desire or ability, thus capacity, to learn to take on new tasks and responsibilities. They're happy with status quo. They're happy with where things are at right now. And that doesn't make them wrong, but what it also does is it tells you they're not going to be able to scale with you. They're not going to scale with you. They're not going to scale with the growth of your organization because they're happy with the way things are right now. Okay? That's the difference between capacity and cul-de-sac. He goes on about cul-de-sac to say this. This person does not have the desire, ability, or intelligence to grow beyond the current job. Thus, the individual is like a cul-de-sac. A cul-de-sac does not take us anywhere farther. He or she doesn't plus the job. Now, on top of page 238, he says this, all jobs have two levels to them. And this is a big one. You want to underline this one, guys. All jobs have two levels to them. One level is the current job's tasks and functions. The other, higher level, consists not only of the current job's tasks and functions, but also the tasks and functions that will exist in the future as the business grows. So look on page 238. You're going to see this, what is it, figure 4. You're going to see this at the bottom of 238. Now, as you're doing your audit of your current people, here's what I would suggest. I would use this figure because this gives you a really good visual. Who on our team is capacity talent and who on our team currently is cul-de-sac talent. And that doesn't mean you go through and fire all the cul-de-sac talent necessarily, because at some stages of your business in some positions, maybe a position isn't going to go any further. Maybe the position is what it's going to be, and that's okay. Yet for your key positions, what he's talking about here is like your key admin positions, your leadership positions. You can't afford to have those people be cul-de-sac talent. Page 239 at the top, he says, capacity talent might plus or improve the job or someday even replace you. Or on many levels, additional tasks and functions you currently do. Cul-de-sac talent won't be able to. It's not that they don't maybe desire to, they won't be able to. And if you remember from MREA and Gary's example earlier on, his first assistant took over running his team. His first assistant just retired recently, I believe, but was still running all MCAs for Keller Williams, all the accounting positions for Keller Williams. Capacity talent will eventually take over pieces of your job, and hopefully, if you're hiring the right person, take over your job, getting you to be able to work on the business versus in it, to where you don't have to be there every single day working in the business. You get to just simply work on it. That's a big difference. That's the difference between hiring capacity talent versus cul-de-sac talent. Now, he goes on to say there, cul-de-sac talent is only support talent. So again, this is where I'm saying cul-de-sac talent isn't bad. It just depends on what position it's in. Cul-de-sac talent, you can't afford to have cul-de-sac talent in leadership positions. Support positions, maybe. That's a further discussion. In other words, he says, replacement talent will push you and free you up by not only taking doing off your shoulders, but also by taking some thinking responsibilities as well. Support talent or cul-de-sac talent will more than likely just take the doing. So cul-de-sac talent they're doers, right? They're not bad people. They're doers. They're going to take a lot of the tasks off of your plate, which is great. We need that type of talent. At the same time, though, capacity talent, they not only take the doing, they're thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead of you, and they're starting to think like you. They're starting to get ahead of you on ideas. They're starting to come to you with solutions and proposals for issues you haven't yet even thought about or haven't seen coming. That's the difference, and I hope you're getting clarity on this. 239, cul-de-sac talent says, I did what you said to do. Not wrong. They're a checklist person. Capacity talent, however, they say, I did what you said to do, plus what seemed to be needed. I heard what you asked and saw where you were going. That's the difference, guys. And there is not too many bigger things you can do for your business than aligning with capacity talent versus cul-de-sac talent. So for this section, do an audit of your current organization. Who in my world do I have that's capacity talent, that can grow with me, that thinks ahead of things, that thinks bigger than just the tasks they have? And then who in my world are cul-de-sac talent? Who in my world just simply think about what needs to get done, what's on the checklist, and gets that done? It doesn't mean either one's wrong, but where is that talent showing up in my organization? And then as a result, where do I maybe need to make some changes? Look at page 240. Now, he's talking about accountability here. So he's talked about recruiting the right people, the right talent, right? We're looking for capacity talent in these roles. He's talking about recruiting them. Then it comes into the training, right? And we'll get into that. We also have to hold them accountable. So look what he says here on page 240. He says, if standards define what we will accept, then in no small measure our standards define who we are. Makes sense, okay? Here's what he also says. In the same way, our business standards will define our business. Now, everyone is probably nodding their head saying, yep, that makes sense. Totally get that. Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, great. Everyone can agree there. The problem, though, is that most agents don't have their business standards documented. And that's his point, and we'll talk more about this. So look on page 240 a little bit further under the what customers want. He says this, and these are some big points here. Many agents think that their customers use them because of the level of service they provide. While that is generally accurate, it's more precisely true that their customers use them because of the standard of service they expect and receive. So this is the whole adage. We've talked about it before in previous sessions. People think, well, I can't build a big team because if I do that, my service is going to go down because people will only do business with me. And what Gary has already proven to us, we've already agreed to, is that that's hogwash, that's bunk. He's building on that case here, saying they're not doing business with you because of you. They're doing business with you because of the standards that you represent and the service that you deliver, okay? So if that's the case, we have to document those standards so we can take them throughout the rest of our organization and hold people accountable to them. And that's what he's saying here. Further down the paragraph there on 240, it boils down to an issue of how successfully to document and communicate those standards to your staff so they're able to emulate your behaviors and levels of service. You understand that if people are loyal to our standards and our service, then all we have to do to be able to extend that, grow our business, and help more people with the same level of service is simply document what those standards and what that service is so that we can then hold our team members accountable to it. When we do that, we're able to provide the same standards and service level to more people, right? So we get to help more people deliver our standards and our service through the process, while at the same time making more money and creating an opportunity for others to make more as well. It starts with you documenting what are those standards and services that you stand for. What makes you popular with your clients? We have to have that documented. Further down there, he says this. However, until a process has been documented, you haven't standardized it. And you can't really expect someone else to be able to do it in your standard way. Quality service that is not defined and documented so it can be consistently duplicated is just a hollow slogan. Now, I don't think anybody does this on purpose. I don't think anybody is purposefully not documenting it just to be able to hold back. I just think it's one of those things that we get so busy we don't slow down and take time to do. And what he's saying here is this is one of the foundational pieces to go from gross $1 million in your business to net $1 million. Because this is what allows you to provide the highest level of standards and service throughout a team of people. You understand that leadership and success in a big scale like this is the difference between succeeding through yourself and learning how to succeed through others. And that's a big gap for a lot of people. That's not an easy thing to figure out. It's not impossible, but it's not an easy thing to figure out. Yet when you can successfully learn how to win through and succeed through people versus simply through yourself, your world becomes significantly bigger. Look what he says on page 241. The most common mistake, that's a pretty powerful way to start that paragraph, so it might be worth paying attention to. The most common mistake agents make when trying to teach and promote standards is when they pursue the follow me and watch what I do approach. Holy cow, have I seen this a million different times. Just come stand next to me and watch what I say. Come stand next to me or sit next to me at the listing presentation and listen to what I say. Watch what I do, okay? So he's saying this is the biggest mistake they make. They do that without any documentation in the mix. What tends to happen is the employee observes the agent for a few days or weeks until things get busy, and then that person is pushed out of the nest and told to ask me if you run into trouble. Guys, this is the ultimate baptism by fire, and this happens on every real estate team that I've ever seen. We don't have time to go through the whole process, so come listen to what I'm going to say. Come watch what I do for a couple weeks, and then I'm going to push you out. I'm going to give you your cards. I'm going to show you your phone. I'm going to say, best of luck, Skipper. Go get them. And I'm going to hope that you survive. Guys, that is not a training program. That is not a program that's going to give you the highest level of probability of success. And this is Gary's point. He goes on further there. The best possible way to get documented standards for your business is to have the first person you hire document the way you want things to get done. Now, again, remember, on the path to the 7 levels, who's the first person you're hiring? The first person you're hiring is the administrative assistant. And the first person you're hiring as the administrative assistant, when done correctly, 3 to 4 months potentially, when done correctly, you're going to find capacity talent in that role, because that first position, that first hire, grows significantly in your organization. That first hire doesn't stay as simply an administrative person. That first hire, in theory and by model, becomes the operations manager of your organization. That should make you want to slow down and go through the process at the highest level possible because of the significance of that role that you're hiring. This is one of the things they're tasked with. That's why it's worth hiring capacity talent for that role specifically. 241 further down, under early and often, he says this: the secret to succeeding this way is to start the documentation process early, work on it often, and never stop. Don't overcomplicate this. Your documentation of your standards can be in a Word doc or a Google doc. It could be an Evernote. I don't care what it is. Just start documenting, because having something to give that first person when they come on is better than having nothing. He goes on further in that paragraph to say this: documenting your systems will be an essential component of your first hire's job. Documenting new systems and updating the old on a regular basis should also be integral to what your assistant does. So their job is to start documenting it and start from where you left off. Their job is also then to continue updating it over time. Because over time, if you look back at when you started this business, you did things then that you don't do now. We all did, right? We all used tools. We all followed procedures and systems then that we don't now. Because as our business grows and the industry changes, so does our internal systems and operations. Yet if we're not documenting those changes, if we're not documenting what we're doing, having an old, outdated ops manual does us no good. It does us about as much good as not having one. So not only is it their job to document it, it's also their job to keep it up to date and moving forward. Now, page 242. This is after he talked about Bob Carter. Bob Carter's the guy, if you're with KW, you understand profit share. Bob Carter's the guy that created the profit share system. Not just the idea, but the actual system of how do we actually pay this out? How is it sustainable? The 7 levels, all that stuff. That's the guy, like super, super smart guy. And if you read that part of the book, Gary talks about the fact that through the process of iterations of changing it and tweaking and bug fixes and things like that, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And to his credit, he realized that he hadn't documented a lot of those last minute changes. And so he worked tirelessly with consultants to document it up until his last few weeks on Earth, right? And so what Gary's pointing to when he says this in the middle of 242, this story, so the story about Bob, this story plays out every day in real estate agent sales businesses across the nation when key personnel leave unexpectedly. Replacing these individuals is often hampered by a lack of proper documentation. Thus, valuable time and money are lost deciphering personal methods of doing this or that. Guys, I hope you literally have that starred, highlighted, underlined, whatever. This happens every single time I'm working with a team and somebody leaves. I've seen it almost every single time. Because no one is ever as systematized as we want to be. No one ever has everything documented as much as they should or choose to. And so when somebody leaves, let me ask you this. Does anybody key in your organization leave when you're prepared for it? The answer is no, right? Whether it's they're leaving because they're going to another opportunity or they're moving because a spouse got transferred, like doesn't matter the reason. When they leave, it's very rarely, if ever, expected. And so more times than not, because we haven't slowed down to take the time to document and process our ops manual, when somebody leaves, we're completely in the dark. I don't even know what they did on a regular basis. I don't know their passwords. I don't know what a day in their life looked like, right? We used to call this a hit by the bus book. And I'm not trying to be morbid, but that's what we called it. If you talk to any of my staff when I was running the market center, we called it a hit by the bus book. And each person had to have an up-to-date at all times. Every month they had to go in and update and review their hit by the bus book. Meaning, and I had one too, meaning that should I ever get hit by a bus or any of them do, hopefully not literally, but figuratively, if we left or whatever, if we didn't exist in that role tomorrow, the company, the organization, the team could go in and grab the manual, that binder for that position and know exactly what that person did, the process, the checklist, the passwords. Guys, I'm telling you, when you have that level of system in place, when somebody leaves or is removed from your organization, it's a completely different experience as a business owner. Because fear doesn't enter into the equation because you already know what you need to do. It doesn't make it fun, but you know what you need to do. This is why I had to be the MCA in the market center for a number of months as we were looking for one back in the day. I'm not an MCA. I'm not even close behaviorally to an MCA. Not even close. Yet here's what I know. Because I had the system documented when I had to remove one, and we were in the process of taking our time to find the right one, I was able to do the job, painfully I might add, but I was able to do the job and agents got paid because we had a system and we had a documented process for how the role operated and what needed to be done on a regular basis. Guys, that's what he's talking about here. Do you have that level of trust in things going sideways or being okay if somebody leaves your organization? If the thought of somebody key in your world leaving terrifies you, it probably tells me you don't have things documented correctly or as well as you could. Now, there's no better time than now, so I'm going to challenge you, start now. Start documenting. And if you don't have an assistant, you're starting to document. If you do have one, talk through them with this. Take them through this section. Have them read this section of the book. Show them why that's important. And then begin the process of actually doing it. Now, top of page 243 says this: generally, you can't just say to someone, document my systems and expect to get a quality product in return. So this is key. You can't just take it to them and say, hot potato. You'll need to give them a model for building a manual and provide ample input from your position of experience. Further on, he says this: the systems documentation model of the MREA, figure 5, which is on page 244, provides an overview of the documentation process. Guys, this is why I love this book, because he's telling us here's why this is important. This stuff is important. And oh, by the way, you don't have to be amazing and figure it out. It's right here. That's the brilliance of this book. Guys, that's the beauty of this book. And that's what Gary continues to do, if you haven't noticed, is he tells you what we need to do, and then he gives us the model to do it. Here's what I think is amazing, guys. Fourth quarter, I was 5 or 6 times back with Gary in Austin. And it wasn't on the MREA book, it was on other stuff. But what's interesting to me is we talked about MREA a couple of times. Because as you guys know, he's doing a rewrite. He and Jay and the research team, they're pouring through this stuff. And what was amazing to them and the process and this discussion we were having over lunch was the fact that most of the stuff hasn't changed. They reran all the economics. They ran all the economic models, the pro formas. They reran everything. And really the only changes you're going to see structurally in this book are added things like internet lead gen categories for things that didn't exist when the book came out. But here's what we know. The systems documentation process hasn't changed. It's the same process, yet people still don't take the time to do it. So I want to ask you, if one of your key people left tomorrow, how prepared would you be in your business? Now, again, it doesn't mean you're going to like it. I didn't love the fact that I had to become an accountant and be the MCA. I didn't like it. It was terrible. Yet I could do it. Agents got paid and the business didn't suffer because I had the position documented. So the same needs to be true for you and I in our businesses today. We must start the process of documenting everything inside of our business, not only our standards, but our job roles and our performance standards, so that if and when somebody leaves our organization, we can plug and play. It's not going to set us backwards, okay? Further on page 243, he says this is a big one, guys. You must also realize this is a process, not a project. If you're like me, behaviorally a higher D and an I, you don't want to do things long-term that are boring and monotonous. I get it. I totally get it. Yet at the same time, here's what we know. This has to be a continual process. Because like we talked about, the industry changes, your business changes, how you do what you do changes, your organizational structure changes. We have to constantly be checking in on this and tweaking and updating and modifying if we want the tool to be beneficial and useful long-term. So this is a process, not a project. Your first pass at trying to list, he says this in the middle of 243, your first pass at trying to list all the things you do will doubtless be full of holes, and you'll want to plug that later. The point of the process is really to get a working operations manual in place and then add to it and improve it constantly over time. Here's what we know. Your first pass, here's what Gary's saying. Your first pass at this, it's not going to be what you end up with. Yet your first pass, your first version 1.0, is going to be better likely than what you have now, because most of you don't have anything now. Most of you haven't gone through this process up to this point. So there's no better time to start than now. Now look at page 245, and this is the fun part, guys. This is the accountability part. This is how do I take my team members and hold them accountable, not only to get the job done. Now, a lot of people, when they hear accountability, they think selfishly. And I think that's why we have a big pushback generally as agents and as humans when we hear the word accountability. We think, oh, it's because somebody just wants to get the most out of you they can. Yeah, it can be, and it can be abused that way. Here's what I know, and I've learned this from Gary and many other people smarter than me. Accountability is not just about getting it all I can for me as the business owner. First and foremost, accountability is getting everything that person said they were going to do for themselves. Accountability is holding people true to the promises they make to themselves. And if I have people inside of my organization, my job as a leader is to help them get everything that they said they wanted and become everything that they can be. That's your responsibility as a leader too. And that's why not everybody should be a leader. And that's okay. The point though, if you have people in your world and you're not holding them accountable, you're being selfish. So let's talk about what accountability is, page 245. He says this, I found that the best process for building accountability into your business is to, and he gives you 3 steps. Number 1, set weekly appointments with the individuals who report to you. Guys, here's what I know. My assistant, Selena, she can tell you my calendar is almost the same every single week. I spend almost all of my week on the phone. If I'm not teaching, I'm on the phone coaching and holding people accountable. That's my life. That's my week. Because that's my highest and best use to my organization, is to pour into our people and make sure they're giving everything they can to accomplish and become everything they can be. So that's what he's saying. Number 1, set weekly appointments. They have to be consistent. They have to be scheduled. They have to be calendar. We have to in the book, 4 Disciplines of Execution, they talk about a cadence of accountability. Accountability doesn't work if it's sporadic and every once in a while. It does not work if it's sporadic and once in a while. Accountability has to be a cadence of accountability, meaning it has to be a rhythm, a routine, consistent. So here's what I want you to challenge you with. Who in your organization should you be having these meetings with? Because if you are the only person in your organization, not talking to you. Yet if you have more than yourself in your organization, you should be having appointments weekly with these people. Now, are we talking hour-long appointments? Absolutely not. Some of my accountability meetings are 15 minutes. What that does is it forces efficiency in the accountability process. They have to show up ready to discuss what we're going to discuss. And the way they know what we're going to discuss is we follow the same process and format each and every time. We'll talk later about that. Number 2, work from a specific job description. We can't have people accountable to something they don't know what they're supposed to do. If they don't have a job description and it's kind of just spitting in the wind, we have nothing to hold them accountable to. So we have to work from a specific job description. And number 3, work from a very specific goal worksheet. Now, an example of this that we use is the 411 that Gary came up with. Not mine, but we use it because it works. And a 411 is 1 year, 1 month, 4 weeks. And it allows us to take these big annual goals and chunk them down into smaller bite-sized pieces so that I know that this week, if I accomplish these things, that puts me automatically on pace to hit this month's goal, which when I do that puts me on pace to hit my annual goal. So we're going to have weekly appointments, we're going to work from a specific job description, and we're going to work from a very specific goal worksheet. Now, he gives you an example. He talks about the consultative interview, which that was earlier in the book. It's figure 26. If you don't know how an accountability session works or what it should look like, follow that model. It's simple, guys. Most people have this breakdown because they overcomplicate it. Accountability conversations should be incredibly simple. And if you're the one leading them, if you're the one holding the person accountable, you should be talking very little if you're doing it correctly. Now he says on the bottom of 245, he's talking about rock and roll. And this is a big concept. And we're going to move fairly quickly through it, but I encourage you guys to read through this more in depth. As you include additional people in your business life, teamwork will become an issue. Your ability to get people to work together and to create synergy among different and differing personalities can generate momentum in your business or stall it all together. If you're watching this and you haven't experienced that, you might not have a pulse. Getting a group of people to work towards a common goal can be a very challenging endeavor. Very challenging endeavor, and that's okay. Again, that's one of the joys of leadership. It's one of the opportunities. That's also why it's not for everyone. Now he says this, at the bottom of 245 going to 246. The latter, meaning stall altogether, the latter happens all too often as staff members all pull in their own directions instead of pulling together. So he gets into the distinction of team versus group, which this might be a great subsequent call. I've got a couple friends who do a really great job consulting on this, right? But there's a big difference between team and group. And you'll never accomplish anything big in your world or in your business as a group. Big things are always only accomplished as a team. Now he says, to achieve teamwork, you need to do two things, middle of 246. Number one, articulate clearly the key goals for your business. Everyone has to know where we're going. If they don't know where we're going, how can everyone be pulling in the same direction? That's your job. That's your team's rock. Our team goal is X. That's your team's rock. That's the big rock. The second thing is ensure that each team member understands exactly how his or her role, their job description, contributes to the achievement of that big rock or the business goal. So first off, we have to know what the team goal is. Second, we have to clearly communicate with our team members what's their role in accomplishing that big goal. And when we have that dialed in, when we nail that, everyone begins marching in lockstep towards that common rock and that goal because they understand where we're all heading and they understand how they can contribute and what role they play in getting the bigger group or team there, okay? Really, really big, guys. If you look on page 247, the very bottom, he's got a really great reference of team versus group. Again, we'll probably do a subsequent call on this one because this is a big distinction. We could do an hour call on this one. So just know we'll come back to this, but read this section, guys. Team versus group is a really, really big distinction. We're going to jump to page 248 as we're wrapping up. 248, combining quality service and quantity service. Here's what he says, and this is huge. As you strive to build a sales business that does a large number of transactions, you'll most certainly face the quantity versus quality issue. We hear this one all the time. We talked about this before. If I grow a big business, I'm not going to be able to deliver quality service, blah, 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 blah. We know that's not true. However, it's a real conversation that is had in our minds or potentially with other people. So we need to address it. Bottom of page 248. He's talking about, he says, these agents. He's talking about the MREA agents. He said, these agents achieve high marks in service and enjoy an abundance of word-of-mouth referrals, yet they spend less time with their clients than the average agent. So he's saying that these top agents who he's doing masterminds with, they're spending less time with clients than the single agents or the small team agents, yet they're still getting a lot of referrals, they're still delivering quality service, and their clients are still really, really happy. So he's posing the question as to how can that be? Just how do they do this? Bottom of 248. Well, here's what they've told us. Be a minimalist with great communication. I want you to underline that. Be a minimalist with great communication. What they mean is that doing what matters most and doing it effectively or efficiently while staying in touch, there's the key, while staying in touch, keeping the client informed is what creates high levels of customer satisfaction, not time spent together. So what's the key there? He said, first, doing what matters most. Doing everything is not important. Doing what matters most is what's important. And then communicating efficiently and effectively, keeping the client informed. Here's what we know, guys. Clients always want to know what's been done and what comes next. What's been done and what comes next. When we keep our clients apprised of those two things, your satisfaction scores, your whatever metrics you're using to survey and see what your customer satisfaction is, those scores go through the roof. What's been done, what comes next. When people know what's been done and what comes next, it takes out the uncertainty, it takes away the questions, and people feel comfort. There's trust. And top agents have figured this out. He goes on to say there towards bottom of 249, if you intend to take your business from earn $1 million to net $1 million, you'll have to master being a minimalist with great communication and great timing. As with so many other aspects of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent business, the difference between big and really big is how you manage your time and focus. So guys, here's what we know. We're talking about net $1 million. You don't have to have a business right now that's even grossing $1 million for this to be relevant to you. Heck, you don't even have to have a team right now for this to be relevant to you. I trust you guys had some great takeaways from today. If you're watching this on YouTube, check out the link down below where you can join the group. If you're watching this in our Facebook group, comment down below. Let me know right now, what were your biggest takeaways? And more importantly, what's your biggest commitment? All right, guys, have a great day. Next week, session 12, net $1 million, money and you. We'll see you guys next week.